All right, welcome back. Welcome back. Today I got a little bit of a different video. Um, I want to talk about Virgil Abloh and his genius of being the luxury industry's chess master. And I want to break down some of these plays. So let me break down how this looks, what this is. Essentially, this is a chessboard. Imagine that this turquoise box is a chessboard, all right? We have the luxury industry on top, LVMH, Farfetch, who owns New Guards Group, Kering, Richemont, and at the bottom we have Virgil Abloh. All right. So then we have these pieces. Okay, we have our king, our queen, and our pawns, or both. Now, this is just a rough estimate of a potential of how the chess game I envision it to be played. So this is just a very loose theory on a loose theory visualization of how I see that whole thing evolving. So if we look at it, okay, let me break this down. On Virgil's side, on the business side, on the entrepreneur side, you have a couple critical assets that you can use for a number of ways. So big asset is the IP. So if we zoom in, right, we have IP. IP and intellectual property is essentially the masters of your business. If you own your IP, you essentially own the masters in whatever business you're in. Then you have the actual business itself, and then you have the assets. So when we look at the case of Virgil Abloh and Off-White, to understand this game, you got to understand these pieces. So the biggest asset with Virgil Abloh, Off-White, etc., was access and market entry into the Black culture, Black community. And you have to understand that the Black community is one of the most sought after markets for consumer organizations and all types of different organizations. It's a very, very sought after market. So whoever controls the Black market and who has power within that is controlling they understand that they have a very large cultural say um, in what goes on in the US. So it's a very, very targeted demographic for a lot of number of reasons. Then we have the business, which is Off-White. And if you know the story of Virgil Abloh, he was an architect, a civil engineer, started designing clothes and interned with Fendi, started working with Yeezy and Ye and everything like that. And then we have the intellectual property that is Off-White. All right, the logos, the names, all the good stuff. Okay. So when we look at Virgil's business, these are some of the big pieces that he has at the industry. Now you have to understand about the industry. The industry, the luxury industry, is mainly 99% run, 99, almost 99% run by rich French white guys. And I know this because I've been at the highest levels of the industry. So you have within the luxury industry, you have hard luxury and soft luxury. Soft luxury being things like fashion accessories, leather goods, uh, and then you have hard luxury, which has more to do with things like jewelry and watches. Price points are a lot different, margins are a lot different, etc. The consumer market is a lot different. The hard luxury, people don't really consider soft luxury as real luxury. That's a whole conversation. Anyways, so we have LVMH, we have Farfetch, we have Kering, we have Richemont. All of these guys are based in Europe, all rich white guys, all doing billions and billions, and they basically have a monopoly on the whole thing. So when we look at these groups, right, because what happens is these groups are not actually the operators of the brand. These groups work more like private equity firms, holding companies, in that they acquire brands, they develop them, they sell them. So a lot of times the brands that they have in their portfolio are actually pieces, chess pieces themselves that they build. So the power with having a holding company, like a private equity structure, like some of these groups, is that they have the ability to turn a pawn into a king. So imagine in chess, right? When you move a pawn all the way across the board and you get to the other side, that pawn has an ability to become any piece that you want it to be, I'm pretty sure. And that's essentially what these groups do. Pawn, they invest. And every investment that they make is a move further across the chessboard, is a move further across the chessboard until they're able to develop it into a very big brand, a huge asset. So they can turn that pawn into a queen, they can turn that pawn into a king, they can turn that pawn into a knight, they can turn that pawn into a rook. So they're in the business of acquiring pawns. All right. So when a new player like Off-White comes into the picture, it's a new pawn for acquisition for these groups. So what do these groups provide? Because they're so large, they're so massive. They have all this money, they're old money guys, they have industry know-how, they have connections, they have all these things, all right? They have monopolistic tendencies and barriers that they place within the industry to have a say so of what goes in, what comes out, who makes it, what doesn't make it, what determines what's valuable, what's everything, right? And then you have all the auction houses like Sotheby's, Christie's, etc. We're not going to get into that right now. But these are, I think, some of their biggest factors. So we have capital, scale, and distribution. These companies, their largest asset is capital. That's the biggest. They're super capital rich, super capital rich. That's all they do is just mainly capital allocation, asset allocation. They're more finance than they are business operational, I would say. Then you have an aspect of scale. So they have partners. When we talk about scale, they have the right infrastructure and systems set up in place to get the pawns across the board. So they have the right logistics network, they have the right manufacturing networks, they have the right tax guys, they have the right senior executives, they have the correct management structure, they have the correct teams in place that can help take a blossoming brand and scale it to something massive. And then lastly, they have distribution. Because of this, a lot of these guys will have incredible distribution networks to place brands in markets, in places where you could not get there on your own. In different markets, we're talking about global markets, because a lot of brands think mostly in domestic or national markets. So if a brand is building in the US, it's not until later that they start looking at international expansion, different markets, because then you get into things like international business, where you might start targeting, the MEIA region, which is the Middle East region, the APAC region, which is the Asia Pacific region, the European region, all of the Europe. Then you have North America, South America region, etc. And once you start getting into the global game, that's when you start getting the global money. Which gets fucking crazy. I'm not even gonna go into the numbers about that. But these guys, they have the correct infrastructure in place to get distribution in global markets, which is extremely important if you're trying to blow your brand up to a certain level. So that's what those are the pieces that they have. All right. When it comes to things like the business, you have the IP, which controls the business, and the business controls the assets. A big thing is access to capital. And you can leverage different aspects of the business in order to get access to capital in order to help your business scale. So, for example, because it all comes down to valuation multiples, etc., right? So let's say just a small number, let's say your business has assets, whether it's equipment or machinery, etc., of worth 1 million. Well, you can get access to capital, business loans, etc., credit with collateral against the asset. So if you have assets worth 1 million, you can get a loan up to 80% of the value of the on those assets. So if you have 1 million, you might be able to get a loan up to 800,000. That 800,000 can help you grow and expand the business, etc. Now, when you look at something like IP, IP is a very, very, very underrated asset. IP is one of the most important assets because IP works in a way that you can get access to capital based on the projected revenues or the valuation of what that IP is worth. So for example, what is the IP? What is the value of the IP of a company like Google? What is the IP? What is the IP value of a company? The logos, the name. What is the value of that? It's incredible. It's immense, unfathomable. But these are separate entities that you can hold and control. So, for example, people will have hold intellectual property holding companies outside of their business entities. So if so, like for example, you might have a business that only holds this. It doesn't necessarily hold this. You might have a business that holds this and this, but you might have a business where the IP sits within the business. There's many different ways that it can go. So, anyways, let's get into it a little bit more. So, when we look about how these deals were happening, this is what was said for the Virgil Abloh situation and the situation of Off-White. So it said prior to this is from the old article. It says prior to this, Abloh owned 100% of the Off-White trademark and had a licensing partnership with the New Guards Group, which essentially means they paid Abloh for the rights to rent out his trademark across apparel, furniture, and fragrance, and they took on manufacturing and distributing the product to different retailers. Okay. So when they license out the IP, Virgil Abloh licensed this IP. He didn't sell the IP. He licensed the IP to the New Guards Group, which was later acquired by Farfetch. And so essentially, he gave them the business. Now, because you have to understand, they want the assets. The assets that he provided was access to the black market, to the black cultural market. So when he made that exchange to license the business to them and license the IP to them, they essentially took the business, but they didn't take control of it. They only took control uh of manufacturing and distributing the product to different retailers. Okay, so they took the assets and the business. We'll take this out of the picture like this. Like this, we'll just say like this. But so Virgil Abloh then gains scale and distribution. Okay. So Virgil Abloh gains scale and distribution. He still stays on as a creative director. He's still working and getting take care of the whole sort of like back end side of it, operational stuff, like the big operational side of things. That's all them. So he cleared that, all right, in that deal. And they're paying him not only to still be the director of the brand and just be the creative head of the brand and the sort of like figurehead of the brand, but they're also paying him the royalties off of the profits of what they're making through that international distribution. So he's getting that off his hands. However, at this, and you have to understand that these groups are still rivals. These groups, they have a weird dynamic where they work together, but they're also rivals. They're also trying to outcompete each other. You know what I mean? So at the same time, because now that the brand is getting international distribution, the brand is growing, it's making numbers, etc., that increases the value of the IP at the same time. So the value of the IP is going up at the same time, which Virgil still owns. So he's kind of getting rid of this side. He's not really controlling the whole operational side of things, but he still has the masters. He still has the IP. He still has 100% ownership of the most important asset. And he's not even taking care of the whole global expansion, which is being used to raise the value of the business, to raise the valuation of the business. So as he's doing his creative thing, he's making it happen. The value of the IP is going up. The value of the IP is going up. And then he comes and makes this crazy deal with LVMH, the competitor for Farfetch and Newgards Group. So he sells a piece of the IP to LVMH, get a crazy amount of capital. Like, I don't even know how much that deal is worth, but it had to be an insane number. It's like they said, right? Abloh owned all of his masters and he could choose what he wanted to do with his trademark, hence being able to sell a piece to LVMH. The Newgards Group will continue to operate the brand, but LVMH has now an indirect stake in the company. Okay. So that's what was traded uh in these deals. In these deals. So LVMH, they indirectly took control of the business and the assets because there's still those licensing deals in place, but now they own a piece of the masters, which makes them more in control of the business of Farfetch and distribution. And Virgil being is, doing his creative thing and just being the sort of like figurehead of the brand. And these guys are essentially making a fuck ton of money for him because he sold the 60% of the IP to LVMH. So the collaboration there with LVMH, that's why it works so well. Because now he had this sort of credibility from the actual industry, from the market industry leader, which is LVMH, Bernard Arnault, and everything like that, which which brings more recognition, brand recognition into the brand Off-White, into the recognition of the name Virgil Abloh, etc., which increases the revenue, sales, marketing, promotion, etc., which increases the profits of the business. And all of that still goes back now to LVMH and Virgil. Um, And it's a crazy, it's really a crazy game of chess. I hope that this explanation sort of helped to make a better understanding or break it down a little bit better, because this can be replicated in other industries, other endeavors, etc. And you have to understand the value of things like IP, assets, business, the operational side of things, and what they want, who you're going against, and what it is that they want, the pieces that they want. So it was genius. It was genius, man. It was genius. And I don't know exactly how much his death, this whole thing had to play into his death. It potentially could have been a catalyst. I do think it's possible. When you look at the situation like Michael Jackson, where he owned, Sony, a very significant stake in Sony Publishing, etc. It's very possible. I'm not gonna sit here and, make a bunch of conspiracy theories about it, but it is very possible. It is very possible that they wanted a larger piece of the IP, or whatever it was. You know what I mean? I don't know exactly. But yeah. Yeah, this is just a little breakdown, a little something different. I might revisit this a little bit later, but yeah, I'm gonna leave it there for today. All right.